in the first 3 years in Bowen, our fuel bill reduced by 43%. In that time, fuel doubled in price anyway, but it definitely saved us a lot of money there.
Welcome back to the Vegalogue podcast, a dialogue about the Australian vegetable industry from AUSVEG. I'm Tom Bicknell. Facing rising input costs and greater environmental awareness, an increasing number of Australian vegetable growers are practicing a system of farming that's come to be known as regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture means different things to different people, but in a broad brush sense, it's a holistic way of managing landscapes that aims to move beyond sustainability to regenerate natural systems, while at the same time supporting the viability of farmers. On farm, that generally translates to practices that improve soil health, store carbon and increase biodiversity, which importantly improve yields and reduce input and water requirements. There isn't a clear definition of what is and isn't regen ag, but it's generally understood to involve things like cover cropping, minimal tillage, rotational grazing and biological inputs, among others. It's a broad church and exact practices vary by crop, region and grower. The best way to understand it is through 5 core principles, according to Andrew Johansson, the Sustainable Agriculture Manager at Mulgowie Farming Company, a family-owned vegetable grower with farms in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. Andrew, thanks very much for joining me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So let's start off with the basics for those who might not be familiar with it. What is regenerative agriculture?
Oh, look, it's a group of principles, and trying to follow these principles. There's no hard and fast like organics where you must, follow these certain things. There's 5 core principles. They are minimize soil disturbance, maximize crop diversity, keep the soil covered, and maintain living roots year round. And integration of livestock is also a key principle.
So how does that look in the field? Do you want to take us through your typical regen production process?
Yeah, so we've always focused on soil health. For us, it started, I guess, laying the groundwork, or the foundation was with controlled traffic so that we could minimize compaction. And from doing that, then we could do minimum till as much as possible and sometimes zero till. So we had to work out our systems that we could, with technology and everything, GPS tram lines very easy to get right, but having the equipment for every operation you do on that tram line can be a challenge and took some time to build, especially when it came to harvesting, because with vegetables, we machine harvest and, if it's wet and the crop's ready, you still got to pick it, unfortunately, and you often can't stay on that tram line in those conditions. So also then, as much as possible, keeping living roots in the soil, we do a mix of, depending on the time of the season, whether it's a mixed cover crop, or we're just using our, rotation of our vegetables, or bringing in a cash crop in between that we can also plant directly into after harvest. So there's a lot of diversity there, and that's the whole idea, is that you try to not just grow a monoculture. You want to have a lot of diversity to help build the soil biology. And by not working the soil as much, you're increasing your biology and encouraging worms and all the things that come naturally if you can possibly not have to over-till the soil.
Let's sort of talk through the steps. So let's say from harvest, from the point of harvest, so you're pulling the crop out of the field. What happens then? What's the next step?
Yeah, well, that is the first step. At the point of harvest, you have to assess your paddock and go, well, what's the soil like? Was it a dry harvest or a wet harvest? And then am I able to, do I really need to work this soil up, or can I just mulch and plant directly into it? And of course, that depends on the crop. If it's a fine seed crop like onions or carrots or something, you probably can't do that. It'd be great to find a way, though. But we go and assess the paddock. We have take a shovel or a penetrometer and just feel the soil and make decisions based on that. We also want to get compost onto the ground, and compost normally needs incorporation. So that's a fine line of knowing when you're going to need to have your ground at the point of reforming. And we tend to do that once a year in the off season. We'll spread our compost and then hill up and re-drain the paddock, and then hope that we don't need to work the ground again for that whole season. So compost is a very important part of it. Planting the cover crop would be the next step if you've got time in between crops for a cover crop, and some cover crops are extremely quick. A crop like buckwheat, for instance, we grew a massive amount of organic matter in 25 days. It was nearly waist height in 25 days in November in the lockyer. And yeah, it's a really good cover and very good for the soil as well. Then you've got to be able to plant directly in. So work out a good way to terminate the cover, mulch it, and have the right equipment on it with your planting gear to be able to have trash throwers that you can cut through, like coulters to cut through, and trash clearers to enable you to plant directly in. But once again, it depends what you're planting. I know a lot of people with transplants are able to do this. Transplants are a good, easy way to do things when it comes to planting into cover. But we're with big seed crops, we find it pretty easy, and we're getting the same plant stand counts and evenness of germination.
So talking about compost, it seems like it's a fairly important part of this process for you. How much compost are you applying, and where are you sourcing it all? What goes into it?
Yeah, so we're very mindful of chemical. We're trying to reduce synthetic fertilizers as much as possible, and especially nitrates. Nitrates block a lot of your other nutrients, and if you can get plant available nutrients naturally rather than applying chemical fertilizers, your crops, the quality is just so much better, and yield. So we mainly use manure-based compost, whether it's chook manure or cow manure, but you have to find products that are not too far away for it to be viable. So whatever you can find in your area. So we're using manure-based with a mix of recycled plasterboard. It's available locally here. The compost works beautifully with it, where it breaks down the paper. It's a good cyclic story, and you're getting your calcium sulfate and not having an extra spreading cost. It's all going in together, and it's plant available by the time your compost is made and well mixed. And we're also putting in a bit of biochar. So there's some local biochar around the Lockley Valley. We're currently using a pecan nut, crushed pecan nut char that goes in as well, and that way it's also activated. It's a home for the microbiology, and it's activated and in the all ready to go when we apply our compost.
So what does the biochar do for the soil?
Well, it stays there for a long time, but it's like a sponge. It helps hold moisture and nutrients, but it's a home for the biology. So we're not putting on massive amounts. We're just putting a bit on every time we apply our compost, around 70 kilos a hectare. But we do that twice a year if possible. So we're just slowly building it up. Any organic matter or carbon is important. It helps with your friability of your soil, water infiltration, your water holding capacity, and being able to hang on to your nutrients without it leaching out.
So with some of the ingredients in your compost, have you had any issues you've had to overcome with contamination with the gyprock, for instance? If it's recycled, is there paint on it? Are there any weed seed issues with the compost, with the manure?
No, so it's all done to Australian standard 55-45, I think it is, or one of those. It's so the gyprock straight out of the boral factory. It's reject stuff that you can buy through. There's a couple of different sources around and basically it is the purest calcium sulfate mined in South Australia. Very, very pure, because it's going into people's houses. It's got to be good. And basically put between two bits of paper. There's nothing in it that's traceable once it's been composted. Also with manures, if they're composted properly, we find they're very consistent because they're always fed the same things, whether it's cows or chooks. They're being fed a diet, the same diet every time. The bedding, you get your bedding when it's a chook shed. So we actually grow wheat in winter and sell the straw to one of our suppliers, and we buy that back in with manure. So it's another good cyclic story where the wheat straw is his bedding, and then we buy it back in our compost. So yeah, it just depends on what's available around you, and yeah, I'd be cautious of anything that's not that's just scraped out of a big yard or something. Could have rocks in it or weed seeds, like you say. But when it's done properly, we never had that issue.
You touched on this before. One of the major changes you've made through this process is when you're applying certain nutrients because of the effect it has on the crop. Could you talk me through what you've learned there?
Yeah, so we've adopted a John Kemp's critical points of influence. You can find his podcast, very, very knowledgeable guy, and I had the opportunity to meet him in USA and do a intensive regen ag course with him with a group of other growers, and it was very, very life-changing, really. We also have a real soil health specialist, you'd have to call him, working for us. And his knowledge is, I don't know anyone with the knowledge he has to just help us get that correct. But it's all about every plant has its critical stages where you can influence yield and get it to its best genetic yield potential. And by knowing those stages and making sure they've got the right amount of the right nutrients, and it's all done through foliars, well, you build your base with your compost and we've got our custom blend base. And then from there, it's all about applying the foliars at the critical stages. And normally with veggies, you have to be spraying a bit anyway. So we work it in with that normally. And we've just seen outstanding results. We've done it over the last 2 seasons, over 3 different areas. It's not just all in the one type of soil or anything. We've done it, from Glenninnis to the Lockyer Valley up to Bowen, and had the same sort of result. And we're just getting very consistent quality and better shelf life and everything else. So it's really a real big change for us. We're seeing great results, and the costs of fertilizer has reduced while we're doing it as well.
To my understanding, one of the standouts there is nitrogen, and if you have too much nitrogen at the point of harvest, it can have some impacts on shelf life and attractiveness to pests, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. So we tend to overuse nitrogen in agriculture, and we've sort of been taught that way. But if it's like throwing petrol on a fire, really, you make plants grow very quickly, but you end up with weak, watery cells that break down quickly. So this is about building your plant and the soil up, building a very strong, healthy cell, ensuring it's got enough calcium and silicon and boron and everything available to it. And a lot of people go and chuck on calcium nitrate every time they want to put on calcium. Well, the nitrate's blocking it. You're just overdoing nitrate all the time. So we don't use any calcium nitrate or pot nitrate or any of those things. We're totally gone away from that, and we just don't need it. The weight in our product and the nutrient density has gone right up. People look at you strangely when you say we're actually aiming to have zero nitrate in the sap of our plant. It doesn't mean we're growing the plant without nitrogen, but you don't want nitrate up in the sap of your plant. And the more you can work that out. There's also another John Kemp, a podcast really worth listening to called The Plant Health Pyramid, and it's all explained in that, how it won't happen overnight, but you'll get there where you build the plant health pyramid to a point that it isn't as attractive to insects and not as open to disease. And we've seen that ourselves. We've seen the reduction in insect pressure and disease pressure, and then the quality with building those cells and shelf life. We've also measured the amount of nitrate in our end product, and it's extremely low. So that's the aim. Nitrates aren't good for for people. And we would like to think we're growing our food as medicine. We want it to be, very nutritionally dense.
And so you've got a number of farms spread around Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. How has that general approach changed based on the different soil types and climates you're growing in?
Yeah, we have found a way at every different soil type, and it really came down to how long it took for management to be able to pull the systems into place that work for them. But for instance, Glen Innes is a decomposing granite, which as soon as you work it once, it turns to powder and it'll seal off. And for years, we had this issue of not being able to get the water down to the roots. It'd be running out and causing erosion. And we just don't have that now. We just plant straight into oat stubble, and it just makes all the difference building up that organic matter and as much as possible leaving the roots there. Can't do it every year, but we try to. Also, in the heavy black soils of the Lockyer Valley, ripping deep and bringing up huge big clods full of moisture and carbon and then bashing it all down again is very costly. And then as soon as you have another wet weather event, it settles down just as hard as where you started. So if you can avoid doing that, and if you have tramline and you don't have compaction, it makes it a lot easier to just help let the worms do the tilling for you and the biology, and you'll find your soil just becomes more friable. Unfortunately, we're having a very wet season and we're having to harvest in the mud and we're making a mess, and it means we're going to have to till the soil again and to get it all leveled off. But that really does suit dry seasons better, and you hold, you got a much better water holding capacity as you go as well. You're not releasing all that moisture and organic matter when you work the soil. Up in Bowens, it's sort of similar. It's very variable soils and very similar to Glen Innes in some ways, and Victoria was very similar with some of its soils as well. So the main differences between Victoria and up north is how quick your organic matter gets broken down. In the tropics, it's so quick, and how quick you can terminate a cover crop. Compared to Victoria, it's much slower, and you can build carbon much more quickly in Victoria in that sort of climate. So it's adaptable across all sites is what I've found. It just takes a while to get the right equipment to do it.
Can you share any of the numbers you've seen from this process compared to your conventional practices beforehand?
We've definitely, I probably can't put a full figure on it, but we've fuel in the first 3 years in Bowen, our fuel diesel bill reduced by 43%. So that in that time, fuel doubled in price anyway, but it definitely saved us a lot of money there. We're just slowly, we're seeing we've been able to reduce our fertilizer costs over the last 2 financial years, but our yield average has increased. So that's really what you're aiming to do. Even with all this wet weather we're having right now, we're just seeing the plants have just got so much more resilience to deal with it. And that's what you're trying to do. You're building a strong plant that's more resilient to handle the weather events.
So how long has this whole change taken you? Is it something that other growers can shift to quickly?
Oh, look, it just depends on what they're trying to do. And for us, I guess it's been a long journey building the foundation of the controlled traffic and then working out what crops work and in the rotation and the timing. But the results just with changing from, over to compost and critical points of influence, foliars, that sort of understanding mixed cover crops, it's pretty quick to, within a season, I was seeing, especially say Glen Innes planting into oat stubble, it just made such a big difference straight away. It's hard to put a measure on because it would totally depend on what crops you're trying to grow and how you can make those principles work. But basically, every time you do a harvest, you walk into the paddock and you start thinking about, well, which principles can I apply here? Can I do all 5 of them, or can I at least do 2 of them? So these principles aren't hard and fast, it's just those principles in general. If you can do those 5 things, you will see improvement to your soil health and crop health.
And has there been any research projects that you've been able to tap into to help along the way?
Yeah, it's been fantastic being part of the Soil Wealth group, and we've had Steph and Dr. Calvin Montague, very involved with a few projects on our farm over the last 5 years, I guess, and down in Victoria as well. And they've just been very helpful. If you've got a question and you're wanting to know how to fix an issue, you can sort of go and ask them, and we'll trial it and see what we can work out. So we've found them very helpful. It's talking with other growers and just being open with one another, and especially in your own area, if you can work together to find solutions. Two heads is better than one a lot of the time. So, and there's so much information out there too on the internet these days to listen to and get ideas that might work on your farm. The journey along the way, we didn't start out to build carbon. Well, we did, but not for selling it. But we've been measuring, we've sort of had GPS located soil testing sites on every paddock for the last nearly 20 years. And so I've got a lot of data there to track what we're doing, and can really see as we build the soil what's going on. We've now included into our soil tests the Haney test, the Haney test that EAL do it. We're finding that valuable to understand the respiration of the soil and the health of it. We have seen the carbon build as we went into min-till. It built by, up to 1% in Bowen. We built in 3 years, which in some areas that doesn't sound a lot, but it is in the tropics. And so that was exciting. And then we had all the floods we had a couple of years ago. I think it was 22 or something. And every site was affected by floods, and we had to work all the soil everywhere. And you saw the carbon drop a bit. Didn't go right down to where it was, but it dropped a bit on every site. So it just really showed me what tillage is doing, and when you can go min-till, how it does build. So we did go down the path of getting our whole enterprise assessed for carbon and the impact, and we are carbon neutral, and we've been able to sequester quite a bit of carbon. So we've only measured a couple of years now, but it's just a good exercise, and then understanding, what our pack houses are also doing. So even with taking the pack houses and everything into consideration, we're able to sequester carbon farming this way.
So in this regen ag journey, have you come across any pitfalls that you'd caution other growers to watch out for?
Oh, look, I would trial things as you go. Any change comes with a secondary problem that you didn't know about. So you sort of learn as you go. We've had more slugs or, those sort of things pop up because of the stubble left. And even, while we're harvesting, having bits of cover crop come into the sample or something like that. So just having to work out what works best with what we're trying to do. But yeah, it's all learning. And so if you do it in trial something new against something old and see the difference, it won't be the same every season. But if you can do it across, we get to do it across multiple sites, planting after planting, because we're planting and harvesting every day somewhere. So you get to learn very quickly when you can do it like that. But I think just, learn as you go, but don't put too many eggs in one basket, I guess I'm trying to say.
But it's worth it in the long run.
Yeah, well, we've found it absolutely worth it, yes. And we keep on focusing on it, and we just slowly build and get better, a little bit better every year.
Thank you very much for joining me, Andrew.
No problem.
The Soil Wealth and Integrated Crop Protection Project is funded by Hort Innovation, using the Vegetable and Melon Research and Development levies and contributions from the Australian Government under project code MT22004. You've been listening to the Vegalogue podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and give the podcast a rating and review. Vegalogue is produced by AUSVEG, the peak industry body for Australian vegetable growers. You can find more news and information from AUSVEG at ausveg.com.au, on our social media channels, or in Australian Grower magazine. See you next time.